Welcome to the 3030 Health Podcast. The following discussion is for education and entertainment. It is not intended to diagnose or treat disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first discussing it with your doctor. Here is your host, Dr. Ruiz.
Hello, everyone. Super excited to be here with my friend, Adam Sadowski. And Adam just finished taking his boards. So, Adam, first boards, man. How are you feeling?
I felt like, well, first, Dr. Ruiz, let me say hi. Thank you for having me for another listener Q&A. I'm excited to talk about all these questions with you. But yeah, I took the boards actually yesterday. And what an exam. It's it's quite the process. It's a 5-hour exam, and they just kind of quiz you on basically everything you know from your first 2 or 3 years, depending on the program. All that information that was shot at you from a fire hydrant, you now have to regurgitate out.
Isn't it satisfying when you stop at a question and you're like, oh man, I know this cold, and you just answer it. I remember starting the exam, and I flipped open the booklet, and I read the first question, and it was like something. I was like, what the hell is this?
Right.
And I was like, just like this moment of like freaking out and cold chills. And then I go to the next question, and I was like something on Krebs cycle, or I don't remember. But I was like, oh, okay, I got this. And then you start going, and then it got better and better and better. The exam, for anyone that's interested, anyone that cares, it's 5 hours, 2.5 hour sections. And this is like step one, before you go into clinical training, and there's always like this, you finish the first part of the exam, and then people walk outside, and you're like you were sucker punched, and people are talking, and then people start talking about like, oh, what'd you answer for it? And I just walked away because I didn't, it was too late to make any changes or anything, and I just walked away. But the question everyone asks is, what part was worse, part A or part B?
I thought part A was much worse than part B.
Ask around, next time you're in school, and people are like, no, part one was so much easier, part B. And it just, your state of mind and all the study and whatever. And people take different scenarios differently, The cool thing about it is that they're preparing us to be awesome doctors, and they're preparing us and they're challenging us. And in the end, all those hours you spent studying, and all the time you spend in the classroom, and all the hours you talk to, professors or your friends, and all the studying pays off. And it's so satisfying to get those results, and you open that letter and you see all those passing. So, dude, good luck, and such a good milestone. And, we're waiting 6 weeks, and then you can move on and continue with your life.
Right. It's crazy how, it's every day you're pounding away, kind of spending like 12 hours at least a day studying. And then when you open up that exam and you feel like what you've studied isn't even on the exam, so then you get kind of frustrated. But at the same time, all that studying will eventually pay off in another format, even if it's not on that specific exam. You now have this knowledge that you know nobody can ever take away from you, so that if you do see somebody who presents into your clinic with this sort of disease or this sort of presentation, you can at least know that, oh, when I studied for my board exams, I recognize this. So it might not be on the exam, but it's still relevant to your clinical applications.
Unless they ask you about a McConkey agar, and then you're screwed.
Right.
Who uses that? But it is important. But the funny thing is that day one, you show up to school and you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and from day one, you're like, they're telling you, oh, you got to prepare for the boards, and it's like the first big milestone in medical school. And then the second half of medical school is a little bit chiller because, now you're preparing to be a doctor. And in order to be a doctor, you have to pass boards. But before you take that step one, in order to continue, you have to pass boards. So it's like all that culmination into this big, crest. And but the second half of medical school is much more enjoyable.
I don't know how it is at other schools, but at our school we have not only boards, but then we have these 3 what are called OSCE exams.
Yeah, totally. Every school has them.
Yeah, so basically, like the first OSCE is just to see if, can you interact with a patient before going into a clinic. Second OSCE is, can you take chart notes while interacting with a patient, kind of develop a treatment plan. And then the third OSCE is like, let's really test you to, see how you would be as a doctor, you know, once you're ready to leave the school.
Yeah, our OSCEs were clinic entrance exam. So it was like, do you have what it takes to be a clinician, basically? The second OSCEs was primary status. So you are secondary and you are basically helping or asking questions that maybe your primary missed, or trying to help with suggestions for treatment plans. And then the third OSCEs is clinic exit, and clinic exit is, are you ready to go out there and see patients? But it's pretty cool how all that learning and all that time is well spent, and it's very satisfying.
Yeah, and those are just the five biggest milestones and five biggest exams during medical school. And it's really funny because, for a lot of people, they're so stress-inducing, but for the most people, it's something that they're more than prepared to do, and it's just that testing environment that gets to people's nerves.
Yeah, and having said that, I never want to take those fucking exams again. So, we have a very special show. We have some listener questions, and we're going to be reading from both Instagram and some questions that people submitted. So, Adam, why don't you start and open this can of worms?
All right. So the first question, which I'm also really interested in, is by Bustelo_Poppy. How did you come up with the name 3030?
Oh, so gather around, children. I'm not telling you. And this is like a very embarrassing story. And some people know. There's people that are really close to me, and they, I am comfortable enough to share embarrassing stories with them. And people that have been around me and known me since before my paleo era and after, they totally know, because it was a big part of my life and a big part of like why I went to medical school and all this stuff and all that stuff. So I do have a standing bet. If you see me at a conference, or if you figure out what it means and you reach out to me and either direct message or come up to me and tell me, hey, is it this? I will not lie to you, because I would be very surprised if you figured it out. And I would tell you, yeah, you're right. And I will buy you a NorCal margarita. But so for anyone out there that is curious enough to, about the meaning of 30-30 strong, try to figure it out and then hit me up. So I'm going to leave it at that. Hopefully someone can get it one day. It made me so happy if someone got it. But yeah, so that's just like a super secret. So, but excellent question though.
So next question is by Dane Sullivan. And he wants to know, what's your approach to patients who are severely hypothyroid but are absolutely against any conventional treatment or pharmaceuticals?
Well, that's a great question, because we do get a lot of patients that come in and they want to seek more natural treatments, or they want to seek treatments that maybe are not non-conventionals, or they have been doing non-conventional treatments and they're not getting better, and they need help or guidance with their methods, and maybe try to find an answer on how to modify their protocols in order for them to get better. And in cases like, for example, intestinal permeability, okay? In the case of intestinal permeability, there are a lot of things that you can do naturopathically or, in medicine. We shouldn't make a distinction between medicine and naturopathic medicine. Naturopathic medicine is medicine. But there's a lot of things that you can do with nutrition, and there's a lot of things that you can do with herbs and different things to fix the permeability of your intestines. And there are medicines that you can use, and there are other things that you can do. And the difference is going to be maybe the speed of recovery. I'm going to give another example. Like, for example, high blood pressure, okay? For high blood pressure, you can give a pharmaceutical that can start acting on your high blood pressure immediately. Or not immediately, but you know what I'm saying. And sure, you're removing that symptom, the symptom being high blood pressure, but that's not actual cure. And if you want to cure high blood pressure, a better way of doing that would be with weight loss, would be with stress reduction, would be with recovery. And all of those things are removing the symptom and are actually fixing the underlying cause of the problem. So very useful to have this approach to medicine when it comes to something like hypertension. Now, in the case of hypothyroid, the most common cause of hypothyroidism would be an autoimmune disease that attacks your thyroid and it starts damaging the tissue in your thyroid. And if it's left unattended, you can start developing nodules, and these nodules can grow and they can become precancers and then cancers. And there isn't really anything in this non conventional approach to medicine that actually reduces the size of the thyroid or reduces nodules. Now, that's not to say that nutrition doesn't play a part on it. That's not to say that, fixing the gut, fixing the HPA axis is not going to help you get better thyroid output. What I'm trying to say is that TSH acts as a little bit of a growth factor for the thyroid. And if you're severely hypothyroid, your thyroid begins to grow. And it makes sense, if it grows, it starts covering more surface area. And by expanding itself, it has more surface area to release thyroid hormone, okay? The only way to block that TSH is by showing your pituitary that you have enough thyroid hormone in your body. So when you take thyroid hormone, you are sending a message to your pituitary, hey, we have enough hormone. And then your pituitary reduces the amount of TSH that it's sending out, and it actually stops growing your thyroid, and it reduces the inflammation in the thyroid, and it actually prevents the formation of new nodules, the advancement of existing nodules, and also I've seen reversal of nodules. So in the case of hypothyroidism, taking a little bit of thyroid hormone is not that bad. That's what your body is craving. That's what your body wants. And if left unchecked, you can screw yourself up more. So I think that the answer to the question is education. So if you have an idea, okay, and the idea is like, oh, all medications are BS. I don't want to take any medications, and that's my goal. That's a cool goal and everything, but I think the goal should be a little bit reframed. And instead of aiming to take less pills a day or less supplements per day, the goal should be, what is a combination of interventions that is going to allow me to grow up and play around with my grandchildren? What is the intervention that is going to help me be healthier and be able to, I don't know, lift heavier or run faster or, have health? And if that combination of interventions requires you to have maybe some magnesium, maybe some digestive enzymes, maybe some glutamine for intestinal permeability, and a little pill that gives you a little bit of T3 and T4, hey, so be it. You're just trying to get healthier. And if that getting healthier comes with not feeling cold, not losing your hair, not having extreme palpitations, not having night sweats, taking a little bit of medication shouldn't be a real problem. And I know that there's a lot of information online about people that do X, Y, and Z, and then they get off of all of their medication. Well, that's awesome, and it's possible. But if that comes with a tag of, okay, if you want to be off of all of your medications, then you cannot stay up late studying for boards, or you cannot go out, you can't go out to a restaurant because there could be some gluten cross reactivity. You have to get up every day and see the sun, so you can't move to Seattle. Well, those are some things that you got to take into consideration. And if a little pill can give you more latitude in life, don't feel guilty. Don't feel like you've lost or don't feel defeated if you dealt the wrong cards. Maybe you didn't have you didn't grow up in a farm, so your immune system is a little bit more reactive, and for some reason you triggered an immune response to your thyroid. Don't feel bad about that. As a last point, like imagine if you have before the invention of antibiotics, okay, getting a staph infection, getting strep throat or pneumonia or thing, it could be deadly, okay? And I do hear a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to take antibiotics ever. Well, if it's a life-saving intervention, okay, we can do things in the back end to avoid the bad outcomes of this intervention. So in the case of antibiotics, oh, I'm afraid my gut biome is going to be gone. Well, if you die, it's going to be gone anyways. But if you take the antibiotics and you get rid of that strep throat and you don't have, cardiac invasion of those of that strep, and you get vegetations and you get cardiac failure, that's a good thing. And then we can do things with like probiotics and fermented foods and good nutrition and all these things to help you reestablish that gut biome. So really cool question, because we do see a lot of patients that come into our office and they ask things, like, I want to get off of all the medications, and just a little bit of education and showing them how you can do a lot of things just by taking that little pill. You see a sense of relief, and you can sense that they are more comfortable. And if your goal is to, get off of all medications and not take a thyroid pill, well, I'm going to give you the guidelines, and they're going to be pretty strict. But if at a point it becomes dangerous, so if we get an ultrasound before our first visit, and then I see that nodule growing, we're going to have to do some thyroid medication, because your safety is my first concern. And we are taught first do no harm. So great question from Dane, and I hope it was helpful.
The next question is from 32KGU. Do you think doing the 23andMe test is beneficial? Also, how do you decide on guests and topics for your podcast?
How do I decide on guests and topics? I'll answer that first. I'm annoying, and I like a lot of people. And if I like what you're doing, I just send an email, and I'm like, hey, would you like to be on my show? And for some reason, people say yeah. A lot of times, it's just people that have been following for a long time, and I value their opinion, and I want to ask them questions that I've had, that maybe they haven't answered on their podcasts or on their blogs. I love helping people. So if you know anyone that wants a little bit of exposure, or wants to promote something or something like that, or they have some cool program, send me an email. And I love talking to people, and I love bringing good conversation to the health space. So that's how I select my people that I bring on the show. And then the second question is about 23andMe. So that's a big one, because just recently, Ancestry kind of started partnering with the people at 23andMe to kind of help you build your genealogy tree. And there was a huge article on NPR where one of the hosts, I think it's Planet Money, she has an identical twin, and that they decided to send a sample together. And when the sample came back, it didn't show that they were identical twins. Okay, and that's concerning, because the science of how they choose which loci of the gene to examine is pretty nebulous. It's a proprietary system, and it's a proprietary way of analyzing the data, and it almost depends to which lab you send it. They have their own special sauce. So at this point in time, it is really cool that we have all this information, but we should take it with a grain of salt and think of it as just that. As a clinician, there are very few genetic markers that we can actually make the medical decisions on. And you've heard some of them, like the COMT677, about methylation and different markers like that. And even within those markers, we still don't 100% know. Okay. Been reading a lot on methylation, and just as many people that are under methylators, they have other markers in their DNA that make them over methylators at a different pathway. So, and that's to kind of balance the input and output of those methylation pathways. So if you think you're a slow methylator and you end up doing some of the things that people do to increase methylation, and you start feeling more tired or more fatigued or more foggy brain or whatever, it could be because the over methylation is being overfed and you're creating a problem down the stream. Okay. So be really careful about that information. And then we got the third thing that I want to touch on is the difference between genetics and epigenetics. You might have and you see those percentages. You have an 18% higher chance of developing Alzheimer's than people with this type of gene have an 18% higher chance of getting Alzheimer's, or like with BRCA. Well, yeah, you might have a higher percentage of developing the disease. But what happens when you're eating, a clean diet, when you're sleeping well, when you manage your stress, and those mutations kind of get muted, and now your chances of developing that are going to be lowered. Okay, so using that stuff as information can be a lot of fun. Like, for example, if in your family, or in your genes, you have a predisposition for hemochromatosis, and that's an accumulation of red blood cells that can cause pain in the joints and can cause oxidative stress. Looking at that information and doing, maybe I'm just going to donate blood every once in a while and to keep those red blood cells levels low. Maybe I'm going to watch my iron content, not super critically, but incorporate a little bit more of like plant-based iron, because it doesn't have the heme group, so it's less easily absorbed. But I wouldn't put someone on medication to lower their iron, like desferoxamine, because they have a mutation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think also I sat in on a pediatrics grand round up at Oregon Health Sciences University, which is the main hospital here in Portland, and they were actually kind of talking about sort of all this genetic testing that's going on, and the geneticists are not necessarily a big fan of the 23andMe. A good reason for that was because of people doing 23andMe and then trying to either self-learn about their SNPs or their genetic predisposition or percentage of, they're at risk for a certain disease, and then trying to either self-treat or trying to have their information read by someone who's not necessarily trained in genetics or even medicine.
And my first like red flag was years ago. I read one of these reports, and I was talking to a friend, and they went into this website and they inputted the raw data into this website, and then this website like kind of churns that data, and then it gives you like a list of 20 or 30 supplements that you must be taking if you have these mutations. And I was like, I don't know about that. And then another person did the same website, and those damn supplements were pretty similar. So so there is a lot of cool information, and you can learn a lot about yourself, but take it with a grain of salt. Something like the ability of you to metabolize caffeine, that can be eye-opening, and that you can be like, oh, that's why I love coffee, and I can drink it all day long, and I don't get a lot of side effects. Or maybe you're not a good metabolizer, and you're like, oh, that's why if I drink 1 cup, I'm wired for the rest of the day. So that's cool data. That's cool information that you can use to to maybe understand your body a little bit better. But it's difficult to make medical decisions on that data.
Cool. So next question is by Majornavik, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that handle incorrectly. Wants to know, what are your thoughts on using CBD or hemp oil for helping treat thyroid disease?
That's a difficult question because I haven't really looked at the data. There's a couple of projects, going around. Very, very excited. In the next couple of weeks, we're gonna be announcing some pretty cool stuff. And one of the projects revolves, about researching some cannabinoids, and CBD is one that would be easily researched because it's not. You can actually do some research on it because the FDA doesn't have a super hold lock on it, and it does have some immunomodulating properties, but like the research is not it's not really high quality. I don't personally use CBD with my patients. That's because I want to make sure, that my protocols are pretty legit and really high evidence data on the things that I use with my patients with Hashimoto's. I've seen a lot of patients that have chronic pain that, self-prescribed or self-utilize CBD in order to help them, with their pain, and they have really good results, especially applied topically. So that's one side of CBD that I've been very interested in because pain, no, it's the number one concern of people going to a doctor, and things that help you with pain that are not addictive or habit forming are hard to come by. So that's one aspect that I'm really interested in about CBD. But personally, in my clinical experience, I have not used CBD enough to make a recommendation or just to talk about it when it comes to autoimmune disease. But with pain, I have seen enough patients. And again, I don't recommend it, but a lot of chronic pain patients, especially when I was at school treating people as a student clinician, a lot of the patients that we saw were taking some topical or CBD oil. The only thing that that I can comment is that you get your CBD oil from a reputable company. Make sure it's well standardized, and make sure it's legal. I know it sounds weird, but you don't want to get in trouble, especially when if you're taking something that is not 100% evidence based. But hopefully in the next couple of months I will be more educated on CBD and the receptors that it affects, and maybe we can circle back and definitely have a better opinion on this. We're interested in not only the receptors that it affects, but how those receptors transcript data, and it goes in to a lower or to other pathways, and how can those pathways affect anything from pain to autoimmune disease to endorphin release or mood stabilization. And so very exciting news, and you'll be hearing about it pretty soon because I'm gonna have a guest on the show that we're gonna be talking about this in the near future.
Yeah, that's exciting because that's one of the probably biggest questions I get from a lot of people or hear while in clinic or while I'm out observing other clinicians, and their patients are often asking about CBD or hemp oil. And I think a lot of clinicians sometimes get frustrated just because we don't really necessarily know the research for it's over encompassing uses that people are using CBD oil for. So it's more of a, at this moment in time, we just don't know.
And all levels of data should be considered. So people that are taking it and they have an N=1, hey, I'm getting great results. I used to have really high antibodies, and I started taking CBD and they're gone. Well, that should be quantified. And someone should be writing those papers, and then as we gather data, then we can be like, well, no, it wasn't the CBD, it was because you were eating cashews, or no, it was the CBD, and it's pretty, and then we can start collecting this data and advance science. What's happening right now is that because of how fucked up drug legislation is in the United States, like for example, one of the big marijuana companies wanted to play an ad during the Super Bowl, And the ad was basically this kid who had some THC extract while he was having a seizure, and how the seizure stopped. Okay. And the big wigs at the company that puts the ads were like, nope, we're not gonna mess with that, and they denied the ad. And yet we saw a bunch of beer ads and a bunch of junk food ads, and because it's socially acceptable, because people are being shushed, and because people are being kind of quieted down, and they're being told, no, that is junk. Okay, people get really fervent about their experience, and I assure you that there's a lot of people that benefit from these extracts. So when you get shut down, you become a little bit more rambunctious, and now you start writing blogs, and now you start writing a lot of comments on different social media platforms, and now all of a sudden all of that you hear is positive outcomes and positive outcomes and positive outcomes, but we cannot guide our decision making on just positive outcomes. And I'm a big proponent of not saying that it's useless, or not saying that everyone should use it, but actually studying what it's doing. And I'm sure we're gonna find a lot of good uses for those extracts. It's not going to be the panacea that people make it seem, but I think in the end, it's going to be an excellent tool for a repertoire for chronic disease.
And I think also, like you were kind of saying, is it necessarily the CBD that's doing it? Is it the CBD in a combination of THC? Is it the whole marijuana plant that people think are causing these sort of beneficial effects? And then we say, oh, it's because of the CBD. And then when we try to isolate the CBD, it doesn't necessarily have the same effects. So there's a lot of factors that go into play.
And there's so many more endocrine or cannabinoids, not just CBD and THC. So what about the other ones? When you're extracting CBD, are you taking enough limonene, and that's what's causing the good effects? And maybe if we purify that other CBD, then we'll get better effects. We don't know. So let's continue investigating this, and let's try to help as many people as possible. And I think in the future, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, we'll see that these extracts do have some therapeutic effects, and hopefully more, we can help more people.
And the second part of her question was, do you know of any research studies regarding the potential benefits, or if it interacts with thyroid medications?
So I am very careful with taking any medication with thyroid. The thyroid hormone can bind to things really easily. Perfect example, we had a patient, Dr. C had a patient, and he was telling us the story that they were, they were taking, the thyroid medication, and the TSH wasn't budging, and the TSH wasn't budging, and the TSH wasn't budging. He kept increasing it, and he kept increasing it, and then he got to like 2.5 grains of thyroid, which is, for an adult, that's a pretty big dose. And you start getting into the supraphysiological levels, and you don't want to get there. And he was like, okay, this is getting out of control. And let's sit down and talk about what you're doing. Are you taking it first thing in the morning? Yep, first thing in the morning. Are you taking it, on an empty stomach? Yep, on an empty stomach. Okay, so tell me how you're doing it. And the patient was like, I wake up, I get up from my bed, I walk to the kitchen, I pour myself some orange juice, and I take my thyroid medication. The calcium in the orange juice was enough to basically deactivate the thyroid hormone. So thyroid hormone away from all medications, just to make sure. I would guess that taking something, that putting something topically wouldn't affect the thyroid absorption. But a specific research, for CBD and thyroid, I am not aware. I do know that it does have some immunomodulatory properties. And I assure you that the thyroid is something that I'm very passionate about and so super interested. And one of the first studies that we're going to be fighting for is going to be to do something with thyroid tissue and CBD extracts. So I'll let you guys know.
Kind of on the topic of thyroid scheduling, what would you recommend for someone for say they forget to take their thyroid medication first thing in the morning, they're kind of feeling sluggish midday? Would you recommend that they take it in midday or just wait for the day to be over and then take it again the next morning?
Your thyroid hormone is on a circadian rhythm. Okay, so your thyroid hormone is actually on a circadian rhythm too, and most of most of the thyroid hormone released by your thyroid is released around 2, 3 in the morning. So the best way to take your thyroid would be to wake up in the middle of the night, take your thyroid, and then go back to bed. But that's gonna disrupt other things, and you don't want to do that. So the best time to take your thyroid, and live a normal life would be to take it first thing in the morning, 30 minutes away from food. And this is a sad one. Even coffee interferes with thyroid medication. And there's a really cool study where people were taking thyroid medication and drinking coffee, and it wasn't, it was not very well absorbed if you take it with coffee. In fact, the Thyroid, which is a brand name of T4 that is a liquid form, and it only has like a gelatin and glycerin, and the T4 was a little bit better absorbed, and you only had to get to wait like 15 to 20 minutes before drinking your coffee. But for other thyroid medication, you want to wait like an hour before you start drinking your coffee. But if you miss your dose, okay, so the reason we prefer to do it in the morning, okay, is because you had a big meal, let's say, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. And now, if you take your thyroid medication like within 30 or 45 minutes, so you're talking about 9 o'clock, now you're going to have to compete with the absorption of your food, and then you're going to have some of that thyroid medication being, not absorbed properly, okay? So you would have to wait around 2 hours for that big bolus of food to pass through your intestine, and then you can take your thyroid, and then you're gonna get some good absorption. So now that's putting you to bed a little bit later. So let's say you had a 9 o'clock meal. Now you have to take your thyroid at 11, and then if you have to wake up early in the morning, you might not get a full night's rest. So that's why in the morning is better, because you had your big meal, your food is through your digestive tract, and then in the morning you have an empty tract, and then you can take it, and now you only wait 30 minutes, and then you can drink your coffee or your water, or you can have breakfast. So that's why we prefer to take it in the morning. Now, we do have some people that they forget to take it in the morning, and I would rather you take it than not take it at all. So we make some, adjustments, and maybe you can take it right before you go to bed, and then just make sure that you're eating it 2 hours after you finish eating your food. If you missed your thyroid dose, just make sure you take it, about 2 hours after your meal, and then wait 30 minutes before you eat anything else. And then the next day, just resume as normal. Missing one day, not that big of a deal, okay? But you don't want to make it a habit. You want to be consistent so your TSH levels become regular and normalized.
All right. So the next question comes from Jennifer J. Heinrich, and she actually has a question regarding Dr. Alan Christensen's new book, The Metabolism Reset Diet. She would love to hear more about maintenance on the other side of the reset. What does that look like? Is it extremely restrictive?
It's so funny, because when Dr. C was writing that book, we had a lot of conversations leading up to the writing of the book, and we started noticing how many people are on very, very, very restrictive diets. These are the 10 things you can eat, or they do some sort of cleanse, okay, and they were eating, Doritos and crap, and then they do a cleanse, and then they feel better, and that cleanse is pretty restrictive, and then now all of a sudden you think, oh, this is the only way that I can eat to feel good. So you're captured into eating this 11 foods, and now your life is miserable because you can't go out with your friends, and you're not eating enough calories, so you feel like crap or whatever. So with the Metabolism Reset Diet, one of the things we aim to do is to give your digestive tract, give your liver a little bit of a reset, a little bit of a rest, cut down on calories, give you good amounts of protein, and then reintroduce some of the foods that you missed. Now I'm very biased. I don't think that gluten is, one of the, it's a good thing to reintroduce. But having that clean slate and restarting and maybe introducing foods that you miss, it's a very good thing. Whenever I treat someone for dysbiosis or for IBS or Crohn's, we might do an IgG food sensitivity test, or I might just tell my patient, okay, you're not going to eat dairy, eggs, or gluten for the next 60 to 90 days to give your digestive tract some rest, okay? And then after those 90 days, I'm like, okay, the person's feeling better. We've done some eradication of bad pathogens, and we've done some good rebuilding of your intestinal tract. Okay, now we're ready to reintroduce some foods. And then we let your body tell you, how you're doing with those foods. So the gold standard for food sensitivities is an elimination diet, okay? But part of that gold standard is the reintroduction of some of those foods to make your palate as wide as possible. Because we go with a shotgun approach and we eliminate things that are maybe difficult to digest, but eventually you want to reintroduce some of those things so you can have a normal life. So the second part, or the maintenance part of this metabolism reset diet, and any diet, should be a complete diet that is the least restrictive as possible, that can keep you satiated, happy, and if your goal is to lose weight, keep the scale at a certain place. And the power is within you, because if you do something like a metabolism reset diet, okay, and you lose 10 pounds and you feel great, and then you go back and you start experimenting with foods, and you're feeling better or whatever, and then 4 months, 5 months into this new lifestyle, you start noticing, oh, I've gained 4 of the 8 pounds that I've lost. Well, guess what? You can do another 28-day challenge and get another 8 pounds, and now you're below where you had started before you started reintroducing, and now you have the knowledge of what things to do in order to lose weight, and you can tell, maybe I was doing a little bit too much on the gluten-free beer, or maybe I was eating too many gluten-free pancakes, and now you're a little bit more cautious. As a last point to this, I remember having a conversation with one of my friends after I had been paleo for a while, and I told my friend Devin, I was like, dude, this is crazy. I've lost some weight. I've been doing this for a while. I think I know my body much better, and any time I see that scale going the wrong way, now I know what to do. And then he looks at me and he says, yeah, that's the best part about this health movement, this self-experimentation, N equals 1, biohacking, whatever you want to call it, movement, that you get to learn yourself. And because of that knowledge, no one can take that knowledge away. And before I discovered that eating whole food, it sounds ridiculous when you say it, that eating unprocessed foods was good for me. Before that, dude, I had tried, the Slim Fast diet. I had tried, going like keto, but my keto was, going to the store and buying a rotisserie chicken and eating a whole rotisserie chicken for lunch, and then a couple of Atkins bars. And I was eating a shit ton of calories. But after I figured out, like, oh, meat and veggies, that's the answer. Now I have the knowledge. So now I don't have to struggle with the next fad diet. I don't have to struggle with the next, health trend. Now I know, and now I have a really good bullshit sensor whenever a new health trend comes around, because if it's, this one supplement is going to make you lose weight, well, in my experience, I didn't need that one supplement to lose weight. So now I can be like, no, it's the diet that's doing that. Or if someone says, oh, if you eat this every day, you'll lose weight. Well, now you can tell, where the calorie restriction is coming from and how after you do that crash and you start trying to reintroduce and trying to go back to your old lifestyle, now you can identify what is making you gain weight or having that yo-yo effect. And then thirdly, whenever you do a lifestyle change, okay, whenever you do like a dietary change, you kind of learn that that it was restrictive, and you experience this like really hard thing, and then your first reaction is to go back after you achieve your goal. You hear it like people on the internet saying, oh, I work out so I can have my beer. That should not be the reason you work out. So if you're doing crash dieting, if you're restricting your calories to 500 calories a day, or a meal, just so you can go back to eating Twinkies and ho-hos, that's not going to be sustainable. You need to make a lifestyle change that is going to allow you to maintain this lifestyle. So that's why this question is so important. The second part of the metabolism reset diet is basically figuring out what is the most anti-inflammatory diet for you and trying to keep within, the limits of that anti-inflammatory diet. And once you achieve that, now that knowledge is going to stay with you forever, and you're also going to know what not to eat and what habits you had and you have shed that were probably making you not be at the body composition that you wanted.
So just to go off on that, kind of talking about an elimination diet and inflammation, Dr. Rob Abbott and I are actually working on a research project that involves participants with Hashimoto's thyroiditis and the application of the autoimmune paleo diet to see kind of how their thyroid symptoms would improve, their quality of life, and kind of their thyroid markers. And it's just kind of interesting when I was looking over the data, some of the inflammatory markers there, C-reactive protein or CRP, just completely plummeted, which is a good thing.
It's so important, and it's funny that I still hear people say, oh, diet doesn't have to do anything with your health. Calories in, calories out.
Right. And I mean, calories in, calories out, in my opinion,
it does matter.
Does matter, but there's also a bunch of other factors that also come into play.
I just spent half an hour answering the question about how the point of the metabolism reset diet is a smart way of reducing and having a little bit of calorie restriction with good protein status. But the metabolism reset diet is not a forever diet. It's unsustainable. So the second part of the diet is the really cool part where you get to learn about yourself. So yeah, calories do matter, and if you starve yourself enough, you're going to lose weight. But food quality matters, macronutrient composition matters, and then to a certain extent, food timing matters, but a little bit less than the other three. And then, there's so many, like micronutrient composition matters. But if you're eating unprocessed foods and traditional foods, you're probably going to hit all your micronutrients. So everything matters, and you can geek out and tweak all of those things and get really good results. But it's not a silo, it's not an island, and you should be consistent and consider all of those things.
The next question comes from Lilia, and she asked, what TSH, free T3, free T4 lab values do you and the team at IH like to see for your thyroidectomy patients?
Oh, that's a good one. So first, what's the reason you had a thyroidectomy? Was it because there was a big nodule that became cancerous, and they deemed it necessary to take away the thyroid? Well, in that case, we want to suppress the thyroid because, again, the TSH is a growth hormone for the thyroid, and if for any reason there was some tissue left behind, the TSH can make it grow, and then that can cause the cancer to come back. So in those cases, yeah, we do want to suppress the thyroid, aggressively. If the reason that the thyroidectomy was because of Graves' disease, where your thyroid was just making a ton of thyroid hormone, then you want to treat it a little bit differently, because they took the thyroid out, not because it was cancerous, but because it was just creating too much thyroid hormone. So in that case, we still want to go to optimal levels of TSH between 0.5 and 1. If you have a patient, if a patient comes in that has hypothyroidism and they are not taking thyroid hormone, then, we like to get the free T3 and free T4, and we want to see what the T4 and T3 levels are. Okay, because we want to see what the output of the thyroid really is, and then that can help us with our decision on how much thyroid to begin with. After that, we rely heavily on TSH to guide how much thyroid to give to the patient, because once you start taking thyroid medication, remember that the pituitary is sensing how much thyroid you need. And if your TSH is low, within those optimal levels, well, your thyroid is not going to be producing a lot of thyroid hormone. So if you wake up in the morning and you go and get your blood drawn, and you rely on those free T3 and free T4 levels, those free T3 and free T4 levels are going to be low, always, because your TSH is relying on that pill, not your thyroid gland, to produce this hormone levels. So there's going to be a little bit of output, and it's usually going to be low from your thyroid. And same thing, if you are taking thyroid medication and you take your thyroid medication and then you go to the lab, your free T3 and your free T4 are going to be elevated. Why? Because you just received a big bolus of thyroid hormone from a pill. But that's for someone that's hypo, that has thyroid hormone. For someone that's hypothyroid because of a thyroidectomy, and this is a radical thyroidectomy where they remove the whole thyroid. Not that important to be too concerned with the free T3 and free T4 levels. As long as your TSH is pretty well controlled, okay? And again, big caveat, if you had thyroid cancer, we're going to be suppressing it a little bit more, to a level where we are not getting hyper symptoms, palpitations, hair loss, muscle wasting, things like that. But as long as you're within the optimal levels, we continue tracking the free T3 and free T4 just to make sure you're absorbing it. But we don't use free T3 and free T4 to make decisions on how much thyroid to give you. If you are within the optimal levels of TSH and you don't have a thyroid, and you still feel tired, you still feel, symptoms of hypothyroidism, you need to investigate a little bit further. You need to start looking at the HPA axis. You need to start looking at your microbiome. You need to start looking at your nutrition. You need to start looking at your rest, at your exercise, at your mitochondrial health, at all of those things that could have similar effects as being hypothyroid. You should be looking at those things, because what we see is that, so you have someone that's hypo, and a little bit of thyroid hormone makes him feel a little bit better. And then they think, oh, so a lot of thyroid hormone is going to make me feel a whole lot better. And then you start going into this rabbit hole of like, it must be my thyroid. And then you start looking at maybe other things like reverse T3 and free T3 and free T4 and, and all of these different things. And your TSH is either super suppressed or within the optimal levels, but you keep beating that dead horse. I know that you probably got some benefit from the thyroid, but that thyroid is under control and those levels are optimal now. Maybe we should start looking at other things and not just pigeonhole everything on thyroid. So to summarize, it depends. If you had thyroid cancer and that's the reason that there was a thyroidectomy, the science is really, the research is really clear that you want to suppress those a little bit more than the optimal levels. If you had Graves, and that's the reason you had the thyroidectomy, and you never had any cancer tissue, you never had anything like that, then dosing that thyroid medication to those optimal levels, should be enough.
Going off of the thyroidectomy, have you had a lot of experience with patients who've had thyroidectomy with some sort of parathyroid problems?
No, not because of the thyroidectomy. I've had some patients that had parathyroid problems, but not because of the thyroidectomy. Yeah, when they remove the thyroid, your parathyroids, there's 4 little dots, around, the periphery of your thyroid, and sometimes you can damage them, and that can cause like calcium problems, and that can be pretty life threatening. So after you have a thyroidectomy, they make sure that for a couple of weeks you're checking your blood chemistries, you're making sure your calcium levels are good, your alkaline phosphatase levels are good, and then after a couple of weeks, if they're normal, then then you don't have to worry about that much. But that's another consideration, yeah, that you need to be aware that your parathyroid is working properly.
So the next question is by Dominique, and she's asking, what is a good level to be at for Hashimoto's in order to see you losing weight?
Well, so that's a great question, and Dominique, I know Dominique, she's cool. Hi, Dominique, and so what are good levels for your thyroid to be in order to lose weight? Okay, that's a complicated question, because your thyroid, it's kind of like this hormone that goes inside your cell, attaches to the nucleus of the cell, and it helps ramp up the cell and make different proteins and make different physiological processes happen. So very important for your metabolic health. Okay, and if you don't have good thyroid levels, you might experience some abnormal weight gain, and you might experience all of these different things that like tiredness, hair loss, and all of these things that are associated with like a slower metabolism. Having said that, it is not a good idea to use thyroid medication as a weight loss aid. It's really dangerous, actually. If you are overdosing on thyroid, you start getting heart palpitations. You can start getting muscle and bone loss. You can, because you're like running that engine really, really hard. So if you're that person that all of a sudden you start feeling tired and you start putting weight, and you know that you eat less than everyone in your family, and you know that you try to exercise but you're exhausted after the exercise, get your thyroid levels checked. And once you check your thyroid levels, try to see what's going on. And if you are hypothyroid, get that TSH to those optimal levels, 0.5 to 1.0. And then, maybe some of those symptoms are going to go away. And then you're going to be able to lose weight effortlessly. But that doesn't mean that if you're not losing weight effortlessly, that the sole problem is your thyroid. You could have some problem within your digestive tract. You could have some you might be eating the wrong diet for you. You might be having some endocrine disruptors elsewhere that are blocking your sex hormones or are blocking your inflammatory pathways, and you could have like a hidden infection. So being able to kind of like tease out, and make sure you have good thyroid levels, but not putting all of your eggs in that basket. A good way of trying to like figure out what's going on would be doing something like a metabolism reset diet, where you go 30 days doing a little bit of calorie restriction with good protein, and checking your thyroid levels just to make sure that you're getting good thyroid levels, good thyroid hormones, and then see if you're losing weight. One thing that Dr. C is like really, really hammering on is that sometimes weight loss is not noticeable, and the best example is like BMI, and the common example of like this dude that's super built, really, really muscular, 220 pounds, but it's solid muscle, and now they're considered morbidly obese, and you're like, that dude is jacked. He's not morbidly obese. And then you can have someone that's like skinny fat, and very, not a lot of lean body mass, and they are, 180 pounds, and they're, 6 foot tall, and they're not jacked, and they're like, oh, they are perfect BMI. Well, that's not healthy, So he's been following some data on the waist to height ratio, and as a predictor of mortality, as a predictor of lean body mass, and it's very simple. You just measure yourself. So it's like if you're 5 feet tall, it's around 60 inches. Your waist should be around 30 inches. And if you have that 2-to-1 ratio of height against waist, you're pretty healthy. And it's incredible how many people don't meet that requirement. So make sure you take good body measurements. Make sure if you're doing a challenge, you're not only looking at weight, but you're looking at waist loss. Reducing some of that visceral fat and making your muscles, and your organs a little bit leaner has better outcomes than the random weight that you get from your scale. So being able to see those measurements and tracking those measurements and making sure you're losing weight, that would be very important. To answer Dominique, yes, if you don't have good thyroid levels, that can cause some weight gain, but we shouldn't use thyroid medication as a weight loss program. And then secondly, it's funny, there are people that are hyperthyroid that they start gaining weight, and they're like very confused because they're like, oh yeah, I have the hyperthyroid, but I'm fat, and that's the one that's supposed to be making you lose weight. So I got a double whammy. Well, what happens is that when you're having that, those thyroid storms where you're just dumping thyroid, your body can become a little bit of thyroid resistant, and then your tissues become a little bit thyroid resistant, and then your thyroid hormone is not working at the cellular level. So if you just overdose yourself with thyroid, you start becoming a little bit thyroid resistant, and you're going to have that paradoxical effect. So get your thyroid levels to the optimal TSH levels, 0.5 to 1, and then work on all the things that are going to help you lose weight naturally and effortlessly. So like your diet, your sleep, I cannot, emphasize how important sleep is, insulin sensitivity, microbiome, stress reduction. And then when you get all those ducks in a row, then weight loss will be effortless. So yeah, those are all the questions from Insta, and that was very entertaining. Adam, what are you up to, man?
So I'm actually up to quite a few things. Now that I'm done with boards, I'm going to be able to focus more on some research projects that I'm working on. I'm working on 2 projects with Dr. Rob Abbott from Resilient Roots, and we're working on 2 projects actually. One is a Hashimoto's thyroiditis project where we're using the autoimmune paleo protocol on some participants with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and just kind of seeing how it's playing out with sort of their quality of life and how it's changing their thyroid lab levels and just sort of lab biomarkers in general. And then we're also involved in another study with Kelly Brogan, and that one's just kind of starting to get moving forward. So we're trying to wrapping up the Hashimoto's project and working on the study with Dr. Kelly Brogan.
That's awesome, dude. Really cool opportunities. And then we have a couple of conferences coming up.
We do. So I've submitted an abstract for the Hashimoto's project, actually with the AANP, which is going to be in Oregon this year. So that's the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians. And then there's the Ancestral Health Symposium, I think in San Diego this year. Am I correct?
Yeah, dude, have you been to San Diego?
I have only been there for about one day when I was actually looking at all the colleges. Bastyr University has a satellite campus there, and I went to go check it out.
Dude, I love that city, man.
Yes, it's very sunny. It's very nice, and I'm actually excited to go.
Dude, we're gonna go to a Bird Rock Cafe, and you're gonna have a trophy wife, and that's hazelnut. It's like a light roast coffee with hazelnut syrup and steamed milk, and it's delicious.
That sounds amazing, but I don't know if it's gonna be able to beat Heart. That's in Portland. That is probably you got me hooked on that cafe.
That place is also, yeah. Hart is one of my favorite roasters. The only one roaster that's better than Hart, and that's Cartel here in Arizona.
And then lastly, another conference I'm very interested in going out to is PaleoFX is it in Austin again?
Oh yeah, in Austin, man. That's a good one, man.
Yeah, so I'm excited if any of you listeners want to come out and kind of hang out with us or talk to us.
Yeah, and really cool. If you guys wanna hang out, I don't know why you would want to, but we usually go out and have like this really badass barbecue, and we like to hang out with people that are supporting this movement. So if you hit me up, I can tell you the details, and we can go have dinner at the Salt Lick. And it's pretty special because I have a couple of friends that are going, and you guys are going to be very impressed. And then one last thing, Dr. C does a kind of an end of the year survey with all the people that are in our mailing list. And we always ask, what could we be doing better for you to help you, reach your health goals? And year after year, people are constantly telling us, I wish I could go see you. I wish I could go be your patient, and it's difficult because of distance. Well, I am so excited to announce this new program that we developed. It's called the Thyroid Advisor. No matter where you are, if you have an internet connection, you can call into the office, and we can help you make sense of your labs. We can help you make sense of your symptoms. We can make sense of what is stopping you from becoming your best self. And right now, I kind of twisted his arm, and I have a special going on if you want to come see us through this Thyroid Advisor in the web portal. So I'm gonna put a link at the bottom of the on the description of the show, and you click on that link, and I think you'll be able to access the portal, and basically you would get a pretty cool experience because you sign up there, and then our office staff will call you within 2 days to get the perfect appointment for you, and then you get to bring your labs, or maybe ask about advice and the results, and maybe look at your supplements or look at all of your medications, and we can give you a pretty good idea on some recommendations of what you can do in order to achieve your optimal health. We're trying to change healthcare as we know it. We're trying to make as many people as healthy as possible, and the price that we have kind of squeezed all of these services into is super reasonable. So if you really want to change your health, if you are struggling, if you feel like there's no one out there listening to you, take a chance on this and really, improve the way in your health outcomes.
That's wonderful. And I was actually at IH for about a week last year, just sort of observing the docs. And one thing that I can definitely vouch for is that they take their time, and they actually do care, and will really sit down and listen to you and kind of hear out your whole story.
So many exciting things, man. We have San Diego, we have Portland, because I'm gonna crash in your couch, and then we have PaleoFX. So we'll get to drink some Heart at some point this year.
Great.
Awesome, dude. Well, thank you for helping me out with this Q&A. I think we have enough questions for another one. So we'll bore you with our answers. And one last thing, Adam. One last thing.
Yes.
How can people get a hold of you?
So people get a hold of me through my Instagram, which is Script to Lift, and it's SCRIPTTOLIFT.
Awesome, dude. You finally got some social media going on.
Yes.
Awesome. So follow Script to Lift. Leave him a comment. Tell him, how sexy he is. And then, and if you have any more questions, just hit us up and we'll be happy to answer. I'll talk to you guys soon.
See you later, Dr. Wiz.